All right.
This is chapter two, Hans Rosling book, Factfulness. Is the negativity instinct. Um, what is a negativity instinct? So, according to Rosling rather, our tendency to notice the bad more than the good. Um, the quote, "Things are getting worse" is a common phrase that is said around the world. There are bad things that are happening in the world today. Rosling explains this with examples such as the rise of terrorism and melting ice. Rosling writes, sea levels will continue to rise by probably 3 feet over the next 100 years. And this will endanger species like polar bears and penguins. He quotes again, the current lack of knowledge about the world is therefore the most concerning problem of all. This is very accurate in today's world because people have turned a blind eye to the good that's happening and therefore entertain the bad due to reasons that we'll be explaining later on in the presentation.
So this is mega misconception. This is part of it, and this is about interpreting data. So Rosling says basically that you can't always trust data because it can be skewed and it can have these certain biases that just looking at it in a plain view that you can't really notice. So she also says one of her quotes is quoted as the secret silent miracle of human progress. And this is referring to the improvements of the world seeming to be slowed down or drawn out. And that is not taken in by the public. So it makes people think that the world is really worse than what it truly is.
Mm. All right, so looking at the graph on the left here and the question as well. Based on the graph, poverty has decreased tremendously since 1966, but it doesn't seem that way today. The amount of poor people or homelessness that is seen on TV or even in real life, it doesn't seem as if this problem is getting better, but based off the information here, it is. Now, Rosling goes on to say level one is where all of humanity started. It is where the majority have always lived since 1966. Until then, extreme poverty was the rule, not the exception. So back in those times, extreme poverty was something that was seen as kind of a norm, something that wasn't seen as a surprise, something that wasn't seen as shocking to people. It was kind of part of everyday life, but wasn't the exception. Nowadays, it is seen as an issue that needs to be tackled, that is being tackled and is being dealt with, which is another improvement in the world.
So for more charts, we can look at the right and we see, dramatic increase. You have 31 years for 1800 and now 4 years ago in 2017, that's doubled to 72 years. And this can be seen as an improvement, not seen in the US, but globally. And if you're getting an increase in life expectancy, that means the globe as a whole is increasing, whether it's economically or through inventions and all sorts of other aspects of it. And she's quoted as saying, the knowledge of tragedies of the past should help everyone realize how much the world has become both much more transparent and much better at getting help to where it's needed. So you have help going out to everyone across the globe. And when that happens, everyone's life is improving so they can live longer, which is great.
All right, even in poor areas. So Rosling explains on page 59, but today people in Afghanistan and other countries on level one live much longer than Swedes did back in 1963. He mentioned Swedes because Sweden is his homeland, the author's homeland. This is because basic modernizations have reached most people and their lives drastically. They have plastic bags to transport food. They have plastic buckets to carry water and soap to kill germs. So they have basic essentials that they need, even though they are on level one. So even if they're in these impoverished areas, it's still better than level one 100 years prior or 200 years prior. So that is also an improvement. An article from Brookings.edu authors Homi Karas, Christopher Hamill, and Martin Hofer quote, the biggest headline from their work, which is the company IMF, may be that when official numbers for India's extreme poverty are published later this year, less than 50 million people will likely be living below $1.90 per day, compared to 268 million in 2011, the last year for which official data on Indian poverty was available. This is crucial because it shows that data will be beneficial in the future or in the past, or even the present, allowing more amount of people to have access to essential items such as plastic buckets, bags, and just basic everyday tools, even if they may still be in level 1 and level 2, as I mentioned earlier. Rosalind did say not to trust 100 data 100%, but this is a huge drop from 268 million people in 2011 to 50 million people in 2019. That there are definitely poverty levels that are improving in India, which is a country with a huge population of impoverished people.
So this is kind of just a broad aspect of everything. You see from the percentages of children dying is down and women's right to vote is up. So this is kind of a broad spectrum of everything bad and good, and you see the complete opposite. So whereas the bad aspect is whether it's high or low, it's the complete opposite is happening, whether it's increasing or decreasing. So overall, globally, everything is getting better.
And these improvements are courtesy of Michael Scott and Dwight Schrute. Breaking it down, there are 3 things going on here. The misremembering of the past, which is one of the reasons that he explains of the negativity instinct, selective reporting by journalists, which I'll talk about later, and activists, and the feeling that as long as things are bad, it's hard to say that they are getting better. For example, on page 65, China and India, who have had recent poverty issues as of a few generations ago, people up on level 3 or level 4, or even level 2, have access to clean clothes and basic needs and live a pretty comfortable life to a certain extent. And they've forgotten about the reality that 40 or 50 years ago, millions of their natives were dying or living in poverty. Going back to the 50s and 60s and the famine in China, even in the 70s or India, I think in one of the pages he goes on to do research in India and see that half-naked children and dead bodies around the streets. So they haven't fell too far, but they've gotten tremendously better. But they still have to remember that not too long ago, their people, their natives were struggling and had these issues. So that just shows the huge improvement of 2 major countries in the world today.
So the media and its effects, this is taking a more crucial look at the negativity instinct, because you see a bunch of selective reporting, and this is kind of the more power that the journalists have, is because they get to choose what they report and what they don't report, whether they want to make a situation look more dramatic or that it's not as dramatic. So this is the advantage that they have, and this is where you need to understand as a viewer that what you're seeing isn't usually all that happened, and you need to look at it from a greater perspective. And I'll read the quote from the screen. Journalists who reported flights didn't crash or crops that didn't fail would quickly lose their job. And this goes on about talking about gradual improvements rarely happening. So just one quote right here makes it look like it's a very bad situation. And it kind of talks a little about the improvements by its word choice, saying it rarely happens. That it's rarely talked about, rather. And this news portrayal right here is a great example of how selective reporting can affect people's interpretation of what's actually occurring.
And then again, the news portrays to a certain extent what they want. They want to portray an image of negativity, and 9 times out of 10, when you're looking at the news, you're going to see the majority of the stories that they cover are murders or something that have to do with violence or just negative stories in general. So they're reporting what they want to put out there, the sound bites and media that they want to put out instead of what is right. And they really project the positives. This even goes from local news all the way to national news. So It's a problem, and hopefully it can be fixed in the near future. So how to control the negativity instinct? There are a few underlined here: the bad and the better. This is what Rosling explains. Utilizing this state of mind that Rosling explains, that using the term bad and better accurately conveys the state of the world as it is improving, but there are and always will be bad components. So when asked how is the world today, you can say, oh, it's bad, or you can say it's good. But if you say it's bad and it's better, that implies that, okay, yes, there are things that are going on that aren't good, bad components, but it is better because it is increasing every day slowly, but it is increasing in different aspects. Expect bad news. Rising quotes on page 72. Media and activists rely on drama to grab your attention. Rosling, keep in mind that positive changes may be common, but they don't find you. You need to find them. So expect the media and people who are affected by it to flood the atmosphere with negativity on the world's progress, which is important to do your own research and really find out for yourself the statistics and the information behind it, because the media can portray it as something that is, like, for example, the people, the news likes to portray a lot of poverty in Africa. When you look in the news, you see Africa, you see people living in poverty, people who don't have money or clothes, but that's not all of Africa. There are very rich parts of Africa. There are parts of Africa that are in the middle class. I think on the Gapminder activity, we saw parts of Ethiopia that were on level 4, families in Ethiopia that were on level 4 and level 3. So there are parts of Africa that are very vibrant and rich, but the media doesn't want you to see that. So it's important to definitely do your research and look more into what the media is feeding to you. Lastly, don't censor history. Some parts of the past are horrifying and embarrassing, but it helps us appreciate what we have right now and gives us hope for the future. So silencing history and choosing to ignore it is a detriment to the knowledge and advancement of human beings. So definitely considering what we've done in the past and how that can affect us now, and what changes we can make to help us in the future. All right, and those are our sources.